So for this video on Black Gold, the 1924 Kentucky Derby winner, I want to talk about Hanley Webb, the man who trained Black Gold. Now, if you think that after the birth of Black Gold, his owner, Rosa Hoots, would have hired one of the best trainers, well, that wasn't the case. Despite his success with Black Gold, Webb was never very well respected by the elite horse trainers of the day. His primary qualification was that he had trained horses for Rosa and her late husband previously, although he had never had a horse compete at the level of the Kentucky Derby before. And unfortunately, Webb never trained another Kentucky Derby entrant either. He also unfortunately took the brunt of the blame for Black Gold's death after the horse was unretired in 1928, then injured during a race at the fairgrounds in New Orleans. This did nothing to help his reputation among Kentucky's racing elites, who seem to have regarded his victory with Black Gold as a fluke. And I suppose this is one way you can measure fame in 2025. You can find a Wikipedia page on Black Gold the horse, and you can find one on J.D. Mooney, who rode Black Gold to victory in the Kentucky Derby, but you won't find a Wikipedia page on Black Gold's trainer, Hanley Webb. It's also hard to find caption photos of Webb on the internet. However, I believe this is him who enters the scene during the Kentucky Derby trophy presentation where Rosa is holding the trophy, and you see the man walk up to the center. That's Hanley Webb, I believe. This also seems to match up with some of the written accounts about how the trophy presentation went down. Now, by the way, here are some illustrations of Hanley Webb from Black Gold by Marguerite Henry. Most of my information on Hanley Webb came from Black Gold by Marguerite Henry and Dream Derby by Evelyn Hunter. Now, Dream Derby, which takes a more scholastic, research-based approach to Black Gold's story, probably has the most information. According to Hunter, Webb was born around 1870 in Missouri. He seemed to have drifted a little west and lived some different places. At one point, he was arrested in Topeka for some dispute over obtaining $600 under false pretenses with some mortgage cattle. Not sure what that was all about, but he later lived the life of an itinerant cowboy before becoming a small-town lawman in Indian Territory, according to Hunter. At some point, he meets Alfred Hoots, Rosa Hoots' husband, and becomes his entrusted trainer. This included training Black Gold's dam, You See It, and Webb and Hoots actually had quite a bit of success with You See It, but nothing on the level of the Kentucky Derby. Now, Mr. Hoots died before Black Gold was born or foaled, but Rosa decided to continue using Webb's services as a horse trainer. Now, one other thing to note about Hanley Webb, somewhere along the lines he lost two of his fingers in an accident. Hence, he was known for having 3 fingers on one of his hands, and this was also the impetus for one of the chapters in Evelyn Hunter's book, Three Fingers and a Chief. The chief in this context was a man named Sam Chief Johnson, a Native American who Webb employed as one of Black Gold's exercise riders. Webb was much more heavy-set than the average jockey and did not ride Black Gold himself. Whatever Webb lacked in formal training to do the job of training elite thoroughbreds, he seems to have had a good working relationship with Black Gold. He was around the horse constantly, fully devoted to developing Black Gold into a champion. A lot of this training was done in Kentucky, and let's just say some of the elite trainers and horsemen in Kentucky kind of looked at him like the old man who didn't really know what he was doing. Nonetheless, Webb continued to take his own approach to things. An example of this, according to Hunter, was Webb letting the horse exercise daily without regard to the weather, and often not bothering to put a blanket on him in cold weather. An example of Webb's extreme job dedication, though, might be that he would sleep in the stall next to Black Gold. When they would go to a track or a training facilities, he would get two stalls and sleep in the one next to Black Gold. And they say he frequently would knock a hole in the wall so he could keep an eye on Black Gold better. Yeah, just leave a note. Send the bill to Rosa Hoots. Despite all the challenges, though, Webb's efforts came to fruition in May, with Black Gold winning the 1924 Kentucky Derby. Now, Black Gold continued to compete throughout the 1924 Kentucky Derby racing season and won 3 other derbies. This included the Chicago Derby. Now, one thing worth noting about the Chicago experience, Webb was robbed of $900 on the streets of Chicago while he was in town training Black Gold. Nonetheless, it didn't hurt his focus too much, I guess, because Black Gold still won the race. Now, unfortunately, one of Webb's shortcomings as a trainer was in medical treatment and his ability to treat ailments suffered by the horse. This is part of the reason why Black Gold had to be retired after the 1924 season. He was having hoof trouble and continued to have hoof trouble despite his success. This also may be exemplified by one of the accounts in Dream Derby by Evelyn Hunter. At some point, Edward Bradley, also known as Colonel Bradley, who owned the farm where Black Gold was being trained by Webb, noticed the horse's foot seemed to be bothering him and apparently sent his veterinarian over to offer Webb assistance. Webb declined any assistance, and I guess the next day the horse seemed to be all right, so they thought nothing of it. But that's an example of an area where Webb probably fell short. Now, unfortunately, Webb's limited ability to treat the horse's hoof became apparent later when Black Gold was unretired. And during his final race at the fairgrounds in New Orleans in January 1928, Black Gold suffered a leg injury and had to be euthanized at the track. Now, even a Black Gold author, Marguerite Henry, who sometimes portrays the human's most questionable decisions in the most positive light possible, her book concedes that Webb tried to do a workaround to treat Black Gold's foot, and obviously it didn't work. And both Black Gold and Dream Derby mention how J.D. Mooney, the Kentucky Derby winning jockey, refused to ride Black Gold after he was unretired. Now, while Henry portrays the decision to unretire Black Gold as pretty much Webb's and doesn't really mention the involvement of Hoots or her family, according to Evelyn Hunter, it was Waldo Freeman, Rosa Hoot's son-in-law, who contacted Webb in June 1927 and told him to put Black Gold back in training. I don't really have any other source on that. Apparently, Rosa and her family needed the additional income, and that was one of the reasons why her son-in-law pressured Webb to return Black Gold to racing. You know, if it's true that Rosa put her son-in-law in charge of her business affairs, I do imagine that he most likely would have been much less sentimental about the horse, or Webb for that matter. And unfortunately, after Black Gold was injured and had to be euthanized following his final race, it was Webb who took the brunt of the blame. According to Henry's account, after Black Gold's death, Webb made statements blaming himself and I guess you could describe it as taking responsibility for the horse's death. But Dream Derby does not really mention that. Nonetheless, like I said, Webb took the blame in the court of public opinion for Black Gold's unfortunate death. According to Evelyn Hunter, Webb continued to train one of Rosa's horses for a little while after Black Gold's death, but was later dismissed by her son-in-law. Obviously, losing Black Gold probably would have strained the relationship between Webb and Hoots and her family. And like I said, if it's true her son-in-law was put in charge of things by Rosa, he would have been much less sentimental about getting rid of Webb if that's what he wanted to do. And unfortunately for Webb, between Black Gold's death and the fact that he was an outsider anyway, he struggled to find work as a trainer after his association with Hoots and her family ended. According to Hunter, when he died in 1940 in Illinois, he was working as a janitor at the time of his death. Although Webb, and Rosa for that matter, were never able to duplicate their success with Black Gold with any other horses, for that 1 year in 1924, against all odds, Hanley Webb managed to train a horse that would be the best of the best. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed learning about the interesting life of Hanley Webb.